All right, folks, before we dive in, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. You're going to want to stay through this one, because what I'm about to break down isn't just another speech from Ilhan Omar. It's a clear picture of how far the radical left is willing to stretch history, rewrite morality, and play victim while holding power. This isn't just politics. It's about the identity of America itself. Here's the thing. Ilhan Omar stood before Congress once again, playing the same tired tune, that America is a cruel, racist nation obsessed with oppressing people like her. She talked about discrimination, about being othered, about living through hate speech and threats. But what she never talks about is what she's done to divide the very people she claims to represent.
Our last witness on our first panel is Representative Ilhan Omar. She represents the 5th Congressional District of Minnesota, also known as the home of Prince. Includes Minneapolis, with the Twins and a big mall and surrounding suburbs. She was sworn into office in January 2019, making her the first African refugee to become a member of Congress, the first woman of color to represent the state of Minnesota, and one of the first 2 Muslim American women elected to Congress. Representative Omar, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman, Ranking Member, and distinguished members of this committee. Thank you for holding this very important hearing. I'm no stranger to discrimination, hate speech, or threats of violence against my family and myself simply because of my identity. As a Black, visibly Muslim woman who came to this country as a refugee, I have dealt with racist, xenophobic, bigoted comments and threats all my life. Even being elected to offices hasn't stopped me from being othered. I've received vile remarks from the public as well as members of Congress. Sadly, I am just one of millions of Americans across this country who have experienced discrimination and attacks. In recent years, we've witnessed increased attacks on Asian Americans, immigrant communities, religious minorities in spaces, and that's only a fraction of violence. It is demoralizing to watch acts of such blatant racism and xenophobia all carried out with complete disregard for the humanity of others. Sadly, our government has a history of sanctioning such hatred and violence. In 1798, President John Adams signed into law a set of 4 bills collectively known as the Alien Sedition Acts. These 4 bills increased the residency requirement for American citizenship from 5 years to 14 years, authorizing the president to imprison or deport foreign nationals considered dangerous to the peace and safety of the United States and restricting speech critical of the government. These laws were designed to restrict the activities of foreign-born Americans, silence minorities, and weaken freedom of speech and the press. By 1801, 3 of the acts were repealed due to its unconstitutional nature or allowed to expire. However, the Alien Enemies Act remains in effect to this day, even though it is unconstitutional as the other 3. The Alien American Act allows the United States President to determine how and if all foreign nationals should be apprehended, restrained, secured, and removed in the event of a war. There are a number of troubling and scary aspects of this law. First, war is not defined in this act, allowing it to be loosely interpreted. Second, this act completely bypassed the judicial process, ignoring due process and the right of appeal. And lastly, foreign national refers to anyone who's not a U.S. citizen, even if they might be a lawful resident in the United States. Meaning, even if you have lived in the United States legally for 20 years, built a community, started a family, for whatever reason not have gained citizenship, you would be subject to apprehension, detention, or deportation without due process. I introduced the Neighbors Not Enemies Act to repeal this unjust law. And while many might say this 18th century law is outdated and has no impact on modern history, I would like to remind you that less than 100 years ago, the United States invoked this act during World War II to detain and subsequently deport Japanese, German, and Italian immigrants. Just last week, we marked the 80th anniversary of the executive order signed by President Franklin Roosevelt, which led to mass incarceration of nearly 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry. In the years since, the United States has recognized injustices done to the Japanese American and subsequently apologized for the cruel internment. Although we promised to never walk down that dark path again, we failed to keep that promise. During the 2016 election, President Trump used the Alien Enemies Act as a justification for the Muslim ban. Administration after administration have continuously demonstrated the danger of unchecked executive power and stain it has on our country's decades and centuries later. Whether it is justifying putting hundreds of thousands of people in internment camps, attacking Muslim immigrants and refugees, or separating families at the border, the Alien Enemies Act dangerously permits the president extreme executive powers to unjustly target an entire group of foreign nationals. This outdated and xenophobic law is an offense to our nation's values. We must learn from historic mistakes based on fear of the other and embrace a system of freedom and equality by passing the Neighbors Not Enemies Act. Thank you.
That's the pattern with these so-called progressives. They weaponize identity to silence debate and gain moral ground. They don't argue facts, they argue feelings. Now Omar spent much of her statement dredging up old history, talking about the Alien and Sedition Acts from the 1700s, the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, and even blaming Trump for invoking something called the Alien Enemies Act to justify his so-called Muslim ban. The emotional weight of those examples is meant to make her sound righteous. But let's take a step back and look at what she's really doing. She's blurring the line between legitimate national security actions and personal offense. She's pretending that America defending its borders and screening who enters this country is somehow the same as historical oppression. This is the same narrative that's been running through the left for years, equating enforcement of law with racism, and it's dishonest. The Alien Enemies Act wasn't about religion or race. It was about protecting the country in times of war. Every president, from John Adams to Franklin Roosevelt, had to make difficult decisions about foreign nationals during crises. Was it perfect? No. But it was about safeguarding the nation, not spreading hate. Omar, of course, spins it differently. She wants you to believe America is a monster that must constantly apologize. I don't buy it, and neither should you. Let's pause there. Because when Ilhan Omar introduces a bill called the Neighbors Not Enemies Act, it sounds nice on paper. Who wouldn't want to be a good neighbor? But think about the implication. She wants to strip away one of the few remaining tools a president has to protect the country from foreign threats during war. In today's world, with open borders, sleeper cells, cyber attacks, and terrorism still real, that's not just naive, it's dangerous. We've already got a president who can barely hold a press conference without a teleprompter, and now progressives want to tie his hands even further. And notice something else. Every time Omar speaks, she centers herself as the victim. I'm a black, visibly Muslim woman. I've experienced hate. I've been threatened. We hear it every single time. Yet she's a sitting congresswoman. She's one of the most powerful women in America. She has security, staff, media attention, and influence. She's not oppressed, she's privileged. Real oppression is a factory worker who loses his job because foreign competition undercuts him. Real oppression is a veteran waiting 6 months for the VA to approve his medical care. Real oppression is a family watching their savings vanish because inflation has eaten every dollar they earned. But that's not Omar's America. She lives in the land of symbolism, not substance. She went on to talk about racism, xenophobia, and hate speech. The irony? This is the same woman who mocked Americans for fearing terrorists after 9/11 by saying, "Some people did something."
Included over $200 million to ILAP for technical assistance to help Mexico's enforcement of its new labor law. This funding can also be used for capacity building to monitor compliance with the new trade agreement. Secretary Walz, what steps is ILAP taking to support the enforcement of Mexico's new labor law? And what steps are being taken to protect the rights of independent unions and workers?
Yeah, thank you. back about a month ago, my Deputy Secretary, Julie Su, I mentioned this earlier today, was in Mexico, met with the labor minister in Mexico, and we have 4 labor attaches on the ground that are working on enforcement of this trade agreement. We have a 5th that will be coming forward. I was at the AFL-CIO convention yesterday, and I met with a worker that organized a union in Mexico for automobiles, and was very excited to be here in America talking about their organizing drive. So iLab is working very closely to monitor that agreement to make sure workers are being protected, workers are being treated fairly, and making sure that's why I'm looking for an increase to help iLab not just in Mexico, but around the globe to make sure that we're doing everything. We saw increases in child labor violations last year. I'm sure you saw the report, Congresswoman. The report is not a good one. It was the first time in about 10 years we've seen violations go up, and so we have some work to do on the international stage.
Thank you, Secretary Walsh. Since we are on the topic of trade, I wanted to know if your department has studied the consumer and labor impact of USMCA in certain sectors since it's been implemented.
Yeah, I work very closely with Catherine Tai. Our office works very closely with Catherine, the ambassador, and so there's a lot of different spaces that we work very closely together.
Yeah, I asked because I want to, take your focus to an article that was published in 2008, and it was late. The headline says how baby formula might end up as a collateral damage in Trump's NAFTA war. And so just wanted, you might not have the answer right now, but just wanted to see if there is sort of looking at some of these things, because this price was foreshadowing some of the trade factors that could possibly contribute to the current formula shortage that we are seeing. And I don't know if you could speak to any impacts that it might have had to the supply and market.
That's one I'd have to get back to you on.
All right, appreciate that. The Bureau of International Labor Affairs in the U.S. is government leading voice in strengthening the rights of workers internationally. One of these initiatives is the Labor Attaché Program, which posts attachés in strategic U.S. embassies overseas to increase labor monitoring. Some of these countries include Vietnam, Colombia, and Mexico. Each aspect of this coordinated approach is vital to ensuring that U.S. trade policy benefits workers in the U.S. and abroad. Mr. Secretary, can you expand upon how this program and iLab generally supported labor rights for foreign workers and their communities? And can you quickly explain how protecting and promoting such human rights benefits is beneficial for American workers and our economy at large?
Well, I think, one of the things that we're very interested in making sure in our iLab office is that we have good, strong relations with governments around the world to make sure that workers' rights are being protected in those states, in those countries. But also, a lot of our own companies are working in those same countries. We want to make sure that we're not taking advantage of workers, even though they might not be American workers. We're working closely with them. And this is, I just came back from the G7 in Germany, where the 7 largest economies in the world. We sat down and talked about the labor atrocities happening in the world, and Italy and Germany, ourselves, that we were all there talking. And Japan was there. We talked about Australia was there. We talked about really making sure we can continue to work together to support workers' rights around the globe.
She even said, "The problem is our colleagues on the other side of the aisle." That right there tells you everything. She's not trying to fix anything. She's trying to divide the country. Because if you can convince half the nation that the other half is evil, you never have to debate ideas. You just destroy the people who hold them. It's the same playbook Marxists used for a century. Demonize your opponents, claim moral superiority, seize control. Now, when Omar talked about Roe v. Wade, she called overturning it religious supremacy and control over women's bodies. Let's be honest, no one on the right is trying to control women. Conservatives believe in protecting life. The Supreme Court didn't ban abortion. It returned the power to the states, where it should have been in the first place. That's federalism, not theocracy. Yet Omar makes it sound like we're living under some Taliban regime. It's offensive, especially coming from someone who grew up under real theocracy and should know the difference. But she doesn't want nuance. She wants outrage. What she doesn't admit is that the left's obsession with unlimited abortion has become extreme. We're talking about defending late-term procedures, opposing parental notification, and funding abortion with taxpayer money. That's not compassion. That's barbarism. And when Omar frames it as freedom, she ignores the millions of unborn children who never get a chance at life. Conservatives believe freedom comes with responsibility. The left believes freedom means doing whatever you want and sending the bill to someone else. And then she played her final card, veterans. She praised the Honoring Our Pact Act, a bill that helps veterans exposed to toxins. And on this one, fine, I'll give credit where it's due. Taking care of our veterans is not partisan. But even here, the pattern shows. She framed it as another story of government benevolence instead of personal duty. For her, the state is the savior, not the people. That's the left's worldview in a nutshell. Government knows best. Conservatives see it differently. We believe the strength of America comes from individuals, families, and communities, not from bureaucrats and politicians in D.C., handing out favors with our tax dollars. Let's talk about what's really behind her speeches. It's about power. The progressive wing knows it's losing ground with ordinary Americans. Inflation, crime, border chaos, foreign policy disasters. People are waking up. So they double down on identity politics and emotional rhetoric to hold on to moral authority. Omar doesn't speak to solve problems. She speaks to create narratives. Every issue becomes a story of us versus them. Immigrants versus citizens. Women versus men. Minorities versus whites. The oppressed versus the privileged. It's the oldest trick in the socialist handbook. Divide society until everyone's begging for government to fix it. She even admitted she might lose her committee position under Kevin McCarthy. And you know what? That's probably the best thing that could happen. The Foreign Affairs Committee deserves serious thinkers, not activists who see America as the enemy. Every time she's had the chance to defend American interests abroad, she's criticized our allies and excused our adversaries. She called for cutting aid to Israel, questioned U.S. counter-terror operations, and cozied up to regimes that hate us. She talks about bringing her unique perspective, but her perspective is often anti-American. Let's not forget, this is the same Ilhan Omar who's used campaign funds to pay her husband's consulting firm, who's been caught making inflammatory statements, and who's repeatedly dodged accountability. Yet, she lectures America about ethics and morality. That's rich. So where does this leave us? It leaves us at a crossroads. Do we continue letting people like Ilhan Omar define our national story as a place of endless guilt and oppression? Or do we reclaim the truth? America isn't perfect, but it's the greatest experiment in freedom the world has ever seen. People like Omar came here because this country offered opportunity, not oppression. Yet she's turned that gratitude into grievance. That's not leadership, that's manipulation. We need representatives who love this country enough to defend it, even when it's unpopular. Who see flaws, but also see potential. Who believe in law, faith, family, and freedom. Not those who see America as something to constantly apologize for. That's the real divide in Washington. Not between Democrats and Republicans, but between those who believe in America and those who resent it.
Madam Speaker, it's been 23 years since Columbine. It's been 15 years since Virginia Tech, 10 years since Sandy Hook, 4 years since Parkland. We have offered prayer and thoughts for years with no real action. It's been 15 days since the school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, where 19 children were massacred. One of the students, a 10-year-old girl, survived because she covered herself in the blood of her dead classmate. We have trained kids to hide under their tables. We have trained teachers to barricade their doors. We have trained schools to lock down their campuses. Now, Are we going to train kids to cover themselves with their friends' blood in order to survive? When are we going to understand the common denominator here is not just criminals, but making it easy for criminals to access deadly weapons? Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, Canada, all dealt with mass shootings. But there was national outcry, and they put in place restrictions to stop mass carnage from happening again. We don't have mental health issues more than any other country. What we do have here is politicians who lack the moral courage to stand up to the NRA. We have a society that is not willing to stand up to protect its citizens, especially its most vulnerable, which is our beautiful children. We have to be better than that. We also must remember, Madam Speaker, it's not just mass shootings. It's white supremacists in Buffalo who massacre elders. It's gangs who carnage our neighborhoods, who allow for a 3-year-old in my district to get mowed down by gunfire. The problem is guns. The problem is our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and we have to have the courage to stand up to them and to stand up for our country. Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you. And I join my colleagues in thanking you for your leadership. Mr. Speaker, today I rise to speak against the cruel and unconstitutional leaked Supreme Court decision overturning settled law of the land, Roe versus Wade. To be clear, controlling decisions about our bodies is a basic human right. The government has no right to regulate what we can do with our bodies. Overturning Roe v. Wade is about control. It's about religious supremacy, and it's about harming women. It would fly in the face of decades of precedent and the overwhelming majority of public opinion if this decision is to hold. We know this decision will fall hardest on the most vulnerable in this country, women who have been abused, women who are the victims of incest, those who have been raped. But its consequences will even be more far-reaching than we can imagine. This will be a blow to everyone who believes in the 14th Amendment, to anyone who believes there's limit to how much the government can control the decisions we make in our private lives. We will be leaving our children and the next generation in a world with less freedoms than we have enjoyed ourselves. But it's shocking to me that all of this is being championed, and it's coming from a party that believes in small government.
So if you're tired of the constant victimhood, the endless division, and the rewriting of history to fit a left-wing fantasy, stick around. Because this channel is about truth, courage, and common sense. And if you believe America still stands for something sacred, something worth defending, then hit subscribe, share this video, and let's make sure voices like ours don't get drowned out by the noise. Because here's the truth the media won't tell you. America isn't falling apart because of guns or borders or churchgoers. It's falling apart because too many people in power stopped believing in it. Ilhan Omar is a symptom of that disease. She doesn't want to heal the nation. She wants to remake it in her own image. And as long as she keeps using her seat to tear down everything that makes this country strong, we have to keep speaking up. That's what patriotism looks like. It's not waving a flag once a year. It's standing for what's right, even when you're called names for it. It's defending freedom, even when it's inconvenient. It's loving a country that's worth fighting for. So don't go anywhere, stay engaged, stay informed, and never forget, our voice still matters.